Can anyone of you give the quick review what we have learned from the previous lecture?
Yes, pass. Let me remember, what did we discuss? It was about operating systems, of course.
Yes, operating system.
Yeah, I can't remember specifically, to be honest.
Okay. Basically, we have discussed at the last slide we were at the scheduling algorithms. We were at scheduling algorithms and we have discussed the first come first serve scheduling algorithm. Basically, in this topic, we discussed that how the processes, how the CPU basically is handed over to the processes and for how much time. That can be done by the scheduler, and there are different algorithms for selecting the process which will execute next. There are different algorithms. I think we have discussed name of them that are first come first serve, shortest remaining time first, shortest job first, round robin, and priority scheduling. And we have discussed the first come first serve scheduling algorithm. Basically, we have given the process's name and the burst time, and then we will draw the Gantt chart and we'll calculate the waiting time for each process and then the average waiting time for the other average waiting time at the end. And we have discussed the two examples of the first come first serve algorithms. Next, the algorithm that we were going to discuss is the shortest job first, that can also be written as SJF. Okay, associate with in this algorithm, basically we will say the shortest burst time for each process is any process who has the shortest burst time will be executed first. Okay, but in the last algorithm we have seen that any process that come first will be entertained first, will be executed first, but in the shortest job first, any process who has the shortest time burst time will be executed next. Okay, let's see what's written in the slide. Associate with each process the length of its next CPU burst. Again, the time that is linked, that basically burst time is basically the time that each process is needed. Okay, that process needs a CPU for how much time. Any process who has the shortest burst time will be executed next. Use these length to schedule the process with the shortest time, and again we will see the shortest time of the process. Any process who has the shortest time will be executed. SJF is again optimal because it gives the minimum average time for a given set of processes. We will see the example. The difficulty is knowing the length of the next CPU request. Basically, the main, you can say the con, everything has a pros and cons. The cons of this algorithm is basically knowing the length of the next CPU request. Here is the example. As you can see, there are different processes available. Okay, that are P1, P2, P3, and P4. If somehow question is given, and the question in which question you will be asked that calculate the average waiting time. So in the question you will have the processes, name of the processes, and in the column you will have the burst time, or maybe in the third column you will have the arrival time, that in which time the CPU has the process has arrived in the ready queue. Okay, if but arrival time is not given, okay, here in this example arrival time is not given, then it means all the processes have arrived at the zero time, 0 millisecond. Okay, all the processes have arrived at the same time, so any one of the process can be executed. And which process will be executed? Who has the shortest burst time? And according to the scenario, P4 has the shortest burst time. So we will draw the Gantt chart first. Again, this is the P4 will be executed firstly, then it will be shown in the Gantt chart just like this. 0 to 3 millisecond P4 CPU is given to the P4 for 0 to 3 millisecond. Then as P4 is executed, we are left with the three processes that are P1, P2, and P3. Which process has the shortest burst time? Any one of you? P1, P2, or P3? Which process has the shortest burst time that will be executed next?
P2?
No, P1. As as you can see that P1 has the shortest burst time, which is 6. P2 has the burst time of 8. And 6 is smaller than 8, then it means P1 is going to be executed next. 3 and burst time of P1 will be added to the previous burst time. That was 3. 6 plus 3, which is equal to the 9. Okay. P4 and P1, both of the processes are executed. Then the P2 and P3 are left. We are left with the two processes that are P2 and P3. Okay, then which process will be executed next, P2 or P3?
3.
Yes, P3, good. P3, 9. Again, we will add the burst time of each process is next. 9 plus 7, which is equal to the 16. And in the Gantt chart, we will write the P3 just like this. And at the end, we are left with the only one process, which is the P2. And we will add the burst time of that process, which is 8. 16 plus 8, which is equal to the 24. And now we will calculate the average waiting time for each process. P1 wait for 3 seconds. Okay, this is the 3 seconds. You will, for the waiting time, if the arrival time is not given, then it means all the processes have arrived with the same time, that are 0. Then we will calculate the average waiting time by just seeing the Gantt chart. But if in some scenario arrival time is given, okay, arrival time is given, then the average waiting time will be calculated differently. So here, as the arrival time is not given, we will calculate the average waiting time just like in the simple way. P1 has wait for the 3 second, okay, and where is the P2? P2 has wait for the 16 second, P3 wait for the 9 second, and P4 wait for the 0 second. We will add all of these and divide by the total number of the processes, which is the 4. Okay, sum of these and divided by 4, answer is equal to the 7. Any query regarding this algorithm?
It's like a division, right, of total time.
Division basically is as it's just like the average, and the formula for average is divide the sum of all these and divide by the number of the processes. Here we have the 4 processes. We just find out the waiting time for each process, and that we will just find out the waiting time for each process. I'll tell you again. Okay, but just as we know that we have the P1 first, we will see how much time P1 waits, as it waits for the 3 second. Okay, here we have written the 3. Next, we have the P2. For how much time the P2 is waited? P2 waited for the 16 second. Here we have written the 16. Then we have the P3. For how much time P3 is waiting? P3 was waited for the 9 second. And then we have the P4. As you know, P4 has waited for the 0 second. We will add all of these, okay, and then we get the answer. So we will divide the answer by the 4. Why 4? Because in average we will divide the sum by the number of the processes, by the number of given scenario. Here we have the processes. The total number of processes are 4, so we divide the sum by 4, and then we got the answer 7. Clear or not, Munib? Then we have the priority scheduling algorithm. As its name shows, that the process that will be executed next, who has the highest priority. Then we have the priority scheduling algorithm. As its name shows, the process that will be executed next, the process will we will get the CPU next according to the priority. Any process who has the highest priority will be executed next. Okay, in the given scenario, we have the processes that are P1, P2, P3, P4, and P5. Then we have the burst time, for how much time each process needs the CPU. P1 needs CPU for 10 seconds, P2 needs the CPU for 1 second, P3 needs the CPU for 2 seconds, P4 again needs the CPU for 1 second, and P5 needs the CPU for 5 seconds. Then we have the priority, that is 3, 1, 4, 5, 2. Okay, priority can be you can say specified. Just like that, shortest number has the, you can say the smaller number has the highest priority, or the largest number has the highest priority. It's according to the scenario. It can be different. Okay, here the smaller number has the highest priority. You can say that the 1 means the highest priority. Okay, where the 1 is, P2 has the priority of 1, so it means P2 will be executed firstly. So we will draw the Gantt chart first. As P2 needs the CPU for 1 second. We will just draw it on the Gantt chart just like this. Next, after 1 we have the number 2. So next process who will be executed next is the P5, and we will have the P5 need the CPU for 5 seconds, and we will add the burst time with the previous process, that is 5 plus 1, which is equal to the 6. Then P1 has the highest priority, which is 3, so we will add this burst time of the previous process, 10 plus 6, which is equal to the 16. And then we have the process P3 who has the priority 4, 16 plus, okay, sorry, who has the priority 4 and the burst time is 2. So 16 plus 2, which is equal to the 18. In the Gantt chart, we will just added the burst time. But according, we will select which process will be executed next according to the priority. Then we have the P4, which is then we have the P4 who has the burst time of 1, 18 plus 1, which is equal to the 19. And again, we will calculate the average waiting time just like this. P1 waited for the 6 second, P2 waited for the 0 second, P3 waited for the 16 second, P4 waited for the 18 second, and again P5 waited for the 1 second. We will add all of these values and then divide by the number of the processes, which are 5, and then we will get the answer 8.2 millisecond or second, that is basically. And then we have the another algorithm, that is the round robin algorithm. In the round robin algorithm, basically we will see the another thing, that is the quantum that is fixed for each process. Okay, and as every process that is to be executed next will come to the ready queue first. So from the ready queue we will take the process and then give the CPU to it. For in the given scenario, as Gantt chart is not drawn, but I'll give you the description just like this. As the processes are given that are 5, and the burst CPU time or burst time is the same thing, that is given. P1 has the burst time 8, P2 has the burst time 8, P3 has the burst time 2, P4 and again P5, P1 has the burst time 1, P2 has the burst time 8, and P5 has the burst time 6. So we will draw the Gantt chart first, and each process will be executed. Each process, you can say, has the advantage, you can say, has fair time scheduling of CPU. Each process can get the CPU for equal amount of the time. Firstly, we will execute the P1, that on the Gantt chart we will draw it just like 0 to 8, and that is the burst time for the process 1. Then and at this quantum is given, which is equal to the 8, then it means each process has the opportunity to use the CPU for 8 millisecond. P2 can use the CPU for 8 second. Again, in the previous process, CPU was utilized for the 8 millisecond. Then again we will add the 8 into the next 8, that is the burst time of the P2, 8 plus 8, which is equal to the 16. And then we have the P3, which has the burst time of 2. As the quantum is 8, but still P3 can use the CPU for 8 seconds, but it only needs CPU for the 2 seconds, so it will use only for 2 seconds. Then 16 plus 2, which is equal to the 18 on the Gantt chart, just like this up to so on. And again you can calculate the waiting time just like the previous one, and here it is given. Okay, then we have another concept, that is the multiprocessor scheduling. As its name shows that there are different, not only a single processor, there are different processors that are available, and you can complete your task by using the different processors. Multiprocessor scheduling can be used when processes are related to one another. Okay, they are not, you can say, independent processes, they are cooperating processes. Scheduling 2 or more than 2 threads at the same time across multiple central processing unit means you divide the task into the different CPU, into the different processors. That is called the space. And again, this you can say this scenario in which you have scheduled your task into 2 or more threads at the same time across multiple CPUs, then this is the space sharing. Then we have another concept, that is the real-time scheduling. Real-time, you can say, on scheduling is intended to serve real-time application request. Basically, if we talk about the real time, what is actually the real-time concept is in generally, real-time concept in generally means, and if we search something on the website, then on the spot we will get the answer. Okay, a real-time scheduling intended to serve real-time application request. It must be able to process data as it comes in, typically without buffering delays. As it's just like that, it will not wait for the response. It just want to get the result, get the response as on the spot. And then again, without buffering delays, it doesn't want any delaying. Processing time request, including as any OS delay as measured in shorter. So determine the order of real-time task execution, highest priority process run first. And real-time scheduling is one of the most active areas of research. You can say real-time scheduling is the research area in computer science field. So you can research, you can do the research. It's the hot area. And then we have the another concept, that is the deadlock in operating system. Can anyone of you tell me, or you guys are familiar with the term deadlock?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, in generally, no idea about what actually the term deadlock is.
I don't know, maybe in
No,
fighting,
man.
yeah, but other than that, no.
Okay.
I don't know in general.
Okay, if I'll give you the real life example, just like if there is a road and that road is only one way, okay, and if two cars are using the same road, and both are in the opposite direction, okay, at the same time, both cars are in front of each other, and both are on the road at the same time, and both are not willing to go back. Okay, so as the road is only one way, so the road, you can say, there is the deadlock, as both anyone of the car doesn't want to move back. Okay, so there is the situation where anyone cannot move to its destination, cannot go to its destination. Okay, so that is the deadlock in real life. But in the computer, when we talk about the deadlock in the computer system, any process basically that needs some resources, and that resource is currently, you can say, in use of another resource, sorry, another process. So that is the deadlock basically. If a process, let's suppose there are two process, the PA or PB, and that needs a resource R1. Sorry, PA is holding a resource R1, but PB also needs a resource R2. But PA is not willing to release a resource, then that is the deadlock, because PB has to complete its execution by using the resource A, and that is in the use of the other process. Then that is the deadlock, because both of the processes cannot do their execution just because of the resource. Okay, let's check the what's written in the slide. Deadlock are set of block processes, each holding a resource and waiting to acquire a resource held by another process. As I've told you that if there are two processes and there is a resource, so each one is holding a resource and wants another. Okay, let me draw this for you. Basically, in the deadlock, we will use the circle for the processes. Let's suppose we have the PA that basically request for the resource 1. Okay, and that resource is assigned to another process. Okay. This is basically, you can say, okay, this is, you can say, the situation of the deadlock that can be depicted by using the graph. Okay, in the computer system, we will in the deadlock, basically we deal with the two main things, that are processes and the resources. Here is the process PA. Basically, PA is requesting for the resource R1. Okay, and R1 is you can say R1 is assigned to the PB, means PB is holding the resource R1, and again PB is requesting for the R2 resource, you can say resource, another resource, that is the R2, but R2 is assigned to the process A. So each process is holding a resource, and each process wants another resource that is assigned to the other process. Okay, that is basically the situation in which your system will go into the deadlock state, because any process cannot complete its execution, so waiting for another resource. Deadlock basically are a set of block processes, each holding a resource and waiting to acquire a resource held by another process. That is basically, I have shown you in the given diagram, in the given graph. Okay, deadlock occur if any one of the condition is true. You can say if any one of this condition occur, you can say deadlock has been occurred. That are the mutual exclusion. These are basically the four conditions that if any one of these situation will occur, you can say that deadlock has occurred. Now, the first one is mutual exclusion. The first one is mutual exclusion condition. In this condition, it means that only one process at a time can use a resource. Okay, if it's using a resource, then it cannot request for another resource. The second one is hold and wait condition. In this process holding at least one resource is waiting to acquire additional resource held by another process. That's the same scenario as I've shown you in the graph, that if a process is holding a resource and that waiting for another additional resource. And then we have the third condition, that is the no preemption condition. It means that preemption means if we have discussed in the previous lecture that there are two types, that are preemptive and non-preemptive. And this is the no preemption means that if any process is executing, any process is using a CPU, then the other process cannot preempt, cannot take the CPU from that process. Okay, a resource can release only voluntarily by the process holding it after that process has completed its task. It means if the process has completed its task, then according to its willing, voluntarily it will release the resource, otherwise any other process cannot take it. Then we have the circle wait, and again this is the diagram I have shown you, that basically here the circle is formed just like this, circular wait condition. Here the circle is formed just like this. If we have start the circle from the P, process A is requesting for the resource R1, and R1 is assigned to the process B, and process B is requesting for resource 2, and resource 2 is assigned to the process A, and this is the circle that is formed. Basically circle is just like this. If the place from where we have started and then we have arrived at the end, we have arrived at that point. Okay, these are basically condition. If any one of these condition is fulfilled, then we can say that in our system the deadlock has been occurred. Deadlock can cause a process to freeze. Okay, according to the discussion till now, can anyone tell me, any one of you can tell me, have you ever go through with this condition, deadlock?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Our PC has maybe crashed sometime. It's just like a reboot, or it maybe the programs crashed. Other
Mm-hmm.
than that, maybe we didn't know about this earlier, so that's why.
Okay. Have you ever faced the system hang issue?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that is
Actually, many
basically,
of us would.
okay, that is basically, you can say, one of the type of the deadlock in which you are not you are basically unable to do your tasks. It's basically you can say not exactly, but it's just like sort of, you can say. Example, okay, if somehow deadlock has been occurred, then that deadlock can cause starvation. Okay. Then we will see what actually starvation and live log are. Basically, starvation is a process is in starvation when it is waiting for a resource that is continuously given to the other process. Somehow, this may also can be occurred that if just say if the process A is waiting for the resource R1 and that is actually assigned to the process B, that is basically the situation where starvation can occur. Process A is actually asking for the resource one, and continuously this process is assigned to the process B. The entire system of process has not come to halt in the starvation. Basically, you can say it's somehow the system will not go to the condition of the halt in the starvation. The other concept is live log situation, in which two or more processes continuously change their state in response to change in their process in the other processes without doing any useful work. Basically, they are changing their states. Neither process is blocked or waiting for the resource in case of live log. The process is not blocked or waiting for the process in case of live log. Basically, this is the picture. You can say that the T naught thread has lock on resource R1 and but requires resource 2 for finishing the execution. Here the concept of thread had been arrived. Basically, you can say thread is the something if the process you can say the process is divided into the threads, just like if I give you the real life example. As be Let's suppose in the real life example, if, of the kitchen. In the kitchen is basically the main process. Okay, if we will go to the inside the kitchen, there are different tasks that can be done, that we will have the chef who will cook the main course, we will have the chef who will cook the dessert, we will have the assistant who will wash the dishes, we will have the waiter who will deliver the eatables to the table. Basically, these are the, you can say, these all are the threads of the process kitchen. Okay, but when we'll talk about in the terms of computer, you can say if the Google Chrome, let's suppose we have the Google Chrome is the main process, and we have the different features that can be done by using the Google Chrome or any other explore, you can say, search engine. I'm just talking about the Google Chrome. In the Google Chrome is the main process. We will, by using the Google Chrome, firstly we have the thread that will provide us the interface. Okay, interface in which we will type our query. Okay, and then we will have the feature of download. We can download the our documents, that are basically the threads that are actually um, doing that allow us to execute the task, that allow us to complete the job. Here we have the threads again. The thread that is written here is the thing, you can say the process is divided into the threads to complete the execution. So thread 0, you can say T naught is has a lock on the resource 1, and basically requires for the resource 2. Same goes for the T1 has a lock on resource 2 and requires resource 1 for to finish its execution. So you can here there are the colored arrows that are used, that not available means requesting. But in the diagram, basically in the deadlock, we will use the we can also represent just like this. Basically, I have told you the two concept in which we will describe, you can say, show the deadlock condition. And again, this is another way of showing the deadlock. Again, we have the concept of locks and signals.